Well, hello everyone, it's T. McLeanful here. I want to give a big thanks to all of my subscribers for sticking with this channel. Thanks for your patience. If you're new to the channel, please make yourself at home, take a look through some of the playlists, and if you like the content, please subscribe and click the notification bell. So, this is the introduction to a video series I will be uploading over the coming weeks and months called Jordan Peterson and the Nietzschean Dilemma. I was prompted to create this series after watching an event that occurred recently in Toronto called An Evening with Jordan Peterson and Matt Dillahunty. You may have seen a few thumbnails for clips uploaded by the various camps claiming victory after the event. Here's one. Jordan Peterson annihilates career atheist Matt Dillahunty. Look at those laser eyes. But no, Jordan Peterson didn't destroy or annihilate Matt Dillahunty, and Mr. Dillahunty didn't school Professor Peterson. The entire event was actually something of a letdown. It wasn't set up as a debate, but it was like watching two people who had only heard bad things about each other being forced into an awkward blind date of sorts. There were a few intelligent questions after the discussion, but otherwise the event was mostly a lemon. There were a few reasons for that. Here's one.
A few weeks ago, I was in Toronto and did a sit-down conversation, a sort of head-to-head with Dr. Jordan Peterson. We'd never met before this, and while I was familiar with some of the news stories about him, I wasn't all that familiar with him. I haven't read his books, and I thought that that would be a really good way to go into the conversation.
No, I don't think that was a really great way to enter the discussion. In fact, it seems like an inexplicably obtuse way to join a conversation. But there were more potent reasons for why the event rang false, I think. Peterson has reached a level of fame where there's pressure now to just put him next to whoever and see what happens. People are using Peterson to platform themselves now, which is fine. I'm kind of doing that myself. But these events should be set up to maximize the productivity of the exchange of ideas. Otherwise, it's not worth my time or the time of anyone that is interested in something more than a metaphorical tribal fistfight between two smug opponents. I really don't want to see this devolve into just seating Peterson next to another flavor of true believer for the sheer spectacle of it. Like that steamed hams meme from The Simpsons that's taken YouTube by storm. You know, like Jordan Peterson, but he's debating an angry Ukrainian lady. Jordan Peterson, but he's debating a zebra while skydiving. Jordan Peterson versus Kathy Newman, but it's the movie Gravity, and they don't make it to the International Space Station because she keeps misunderstanding everything he says. You get the point. But it was while thinking about why the event had missed the mark that I realized that, to some extent, what we witnessed on that stage illustrates the effects of the Nietzschean dilemma. Wait, hold on. What is this Nietzschean dilemma you keep mentioning? It sounds kind of fancy schmancy. The Nietzschean dilemma is something I've been obsessing over all of my life, although, and I'm guessing it's the same for many of you, I didn't know that's what it could be called. I have spent a large amount of mind power and time trying to puzzle it out, though. But before we get into exactly what the Nietzschean dilemma is, it would be useful to provide some background about myself, which I will be doing throughout this series when I feel it's appropriate. I've had a painful health condition for almost 10 years now that's been largely a mystery to the medical folks of Canada's socialized health system. 2 years ago, it was at a point where I was forced to sideline my career as a technology writer and marketer. Since then, I've been working to solve the problem myself, and although I've had some success, the search for full resolution continues. But over and above these problems, we all have problems, what was really getting me down was the intensifying polarization of Western society and the complete failure of the mainstream media to adhere to the basics of ethical news reporting. The alternative media was an alternative, but it was not an objective substitute for what was supposed to be mainstream, objective news reporting. The space for reasonable discussion seemed to be shrinking rapidly, and I found this depressing. A lot of it had to do with the failure of the media, They had gone completely insane with Trump derangement syndrome after the election. As a former print reporter, it was embarrassing and depressing to watch. And it was at a point when things seemed to be at their worst on all fronts that I discovered Jordan Peterson. It was the fall of 2016, and he was speaking out against these newly proposed compelled speech laws in Canada, where I live. I saw immediately that he was raising the alarm about a polarizing, irrational, and incredibly pernicious ideology that had spread throughout university campuses and out into the corporate and political world.
I'm trying to get into the headspace of some of my colleagues. So I got out a textbook. It was called Race, Class, and Gender, and it's an anthology that's used in cultural studies courses, in women's studies courses, and it's sort of the go-to text, so I'm told. And I'm reading it, and I turned to page 14, and I can tell you it's page 14 because I was so astounded by what I found. And it said, it says, objectivity as found through rational thought is a Western and masculine concept that we will challenge throughout this text.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I said,
it's too bad. It's too bad that you're shocked by that. Because
I couldn't believe it. So you want to go for irrational?
The PC types have been saying exactly that since the 1970s. Like that is they make no mistake about this. This is why McClatchy is wrong. This isn't something they're secreting in. This is the dead statement. Oh yeah, it's that the whole notion of logic and coherence and empirical data, for that matter,
Evidence.
the very nature.
Reject evidence.
Let's question the definition of evidence. Because the underlying idea, remember, the underlying idea here is that all hierarchies are predicated on power. So if the reason that I put forward something as evidence isn't because it's evidence, it's because it's evidence that I get to have that position of power. And so if you're a postmodernist and you say, well, I'm going to question your evidence, what you think you're saying is you're going to question my claim to that arbitrary power. The whole idea that there's evidence outside of claims of arbitrary power, the postmodernists dispensed with that in the 1970s.
I just read a paper that said that mathematics is whiteness.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't know that mathematics could have a race.
Mm-hmm.
I had watched the natural outcome of the identity politics takeover of the humanities completely tank two promising Canadian companies firsthand. One of them right up close. I was right in the center of the storm. But that's a story for another video. Anyway, I began watching Peterson's personality lectures on his YouTube channel. I recognized some of the lessons Peterson was teaching his students about accepting life's suffering and how to deal with difficult and frustrating realities. It felt good to hear him talk about the realities of life honestly and intelligently, while imparting really fascinating lessons about the biology of psychology. And it was while I was sitting and watching one of those lectures that I came upon the 6-minute segment I'm about to play here.
Point of departure: it is an error to consider social distress or physiological degeneration or the corruption of all things as the cause of nihilism. That's a critique of the later Freudian ideas right there and then, because what Nietzsche says was, look, if things are going wrong for you, or if they're going wrong in general, it's really straightforward to say that, well, there's something wrong with society, that would be social distress, or there's some physiological degeneration, there's something wrong with you physically, or everything is just corrupted, being itself is corrupt, which is a classic explanation, right? You hear that all the time. You think, well, people are suffering for one reason or another. Well, why? Well, there's something wrong biologically, or society is corrupted and everything is unfair. Nietzsche says, no, you're not going to get away with that. First he says, ours is the most honest and compassionate age, comparing modern civilization, let's say, to everything that has come before it. So speaking of corruption is not something you can do lightly. And then he says, and this is remarkable, distress, whether psychic, physical, or intellectual, need not at all produce nihilism. That is the radical rejection of value, meaning, and desirability. Such distress always permits a variety of interpretations. Well, that's a rough one. It's like, well, you had a rough childhood. Well, someone else who had your childhood might not have drawn those conclusions. So here's an example. You know that most people who abuse children were abused by as children, right? But most people who were abused as children do not grow up to abuse children. And you can figure that out arithmetically, because if it was the case that everyone abused grew up to abuse, in about 4 generations everyone would be being beat to death in childhood as a matter of course, because it would spread exponentially. That isn't what happens. It dampens. And why is that? Well, if you're bullied as a child, we could say, well, you could draw 2 conclusions, causal conclusions. Being bullied caused me to be a bully. Fair enough, man, that's an understandable story. How about being bullied caused me not ever to be a bully? Well, why is that any less reasonable a conclusion? It's frequently one that people draw, and since the 2 opposite conclusions can be drawn from the same set of experiences, you cannot say that the experiences caused the conclusions. And that's Nietzsche's critique of, say, sociological or psychological determinism with regards to the optimism or pessimism of your worldview. Such distress always permits a variety of interpretations. Right. Rather, it is in one particular interpretation, the Christian moral one, that nihilism is rooted. The end of Christianity, at the hands of its own morality, that was the development of the sense of truth, which cannot be replaced, which turns against the Christian God. The sense of truthfulness, highly developed by Christianity, is nauseated by the falseness and mendaciousness of all Christian interpretations of the world and of history. A remarkable claim. And then this one's even worse. It's absolutely brilliant, I think. Rebound from God is truth to the fanatical faith, all is false. That's nihilism, an act of Buddhism. And Nietzsche explains that. And this is, you know, I talked to you guys a little bit about the idea of the game and the metagame, you know, the metagame being the set of all games. Nietzsche draws on a conception like that for this criticism, because he says when you lose faith in something, and that happens to people very frequently, when you lose faith in something, because you're human and because you can abstract, it's not only that you lose faith in that thing, that person, that system. The fact that you've lost faith in that indicates to you that it's possible to lose faith in anything, in every system, in every person. Once burnt, forever shy. And that's nihilism. The fact that one thing can collapse on you can make you completely unwilling to manifest any faith in anything whatsoever. And that's the emergence of nihilism. The end of the moral interpretation of the world, which no longer has any sanction after it has tried to escape into beyond, leads to nihilism. Another critique of Christianity embedded in that sentence, he said, well, Christianity needed to be destroyed even by itself because it put so much emphasis on the afterworld, on heaven, that it forgot completely about life now and here. And because of that, needed to be destroyed, because life here is sufficiently rife with suffering, so it needs to be addressed. And people, it's wrong, it's incorrect to inform people that they should wait for some hereafter and justify their suffering in that manner. And so he would say in some sense that even the idea of compassion, which is central to Christianity, is also one of the reasons why Christianity collapsed under its own weight. The untenability of one interpretation of the world upon which a tremendous amount of energy has been lavished awakens the suspicion that all interpretations of the world are false. Well, so what? You might say, well, so what if you don't believe in anything? Well, I would take a neuropsychological approach to that. Most of the positive emotions, dopaminergic. It's a consequence of the manifestation of the exploratory system that has its roots in the hypothalamus, a very ancient part of the brain. It's the same part of the brain that cocaine and heroin, all the drugs that people like to abuse, the drugs that are exciting, not the drugs that are calming, it activates that system. It's the system that's activated when something exciting happens to you or when something novel happens to you. But more importantly, it's the system that's activated when you're pursuing a goal and you see that you're moving towards the goal. So what does that mean? No goal, no positive emotion. So you say, well, if you have nothing to believe in, if you have no value structure left, because a value structure says this is better than this, no value structure, no positive emotion. Well, and so what's the problem with that? It's easy to get rid of your positive emotion. That's not a problem because it's rather fragile and tenuous. Try getting rid of your negative emotion. Good luck. That is not going to happen. So what happens is that if your value system collapses, then all you're left with is negative emotion. And that is not a good thing. Well, so Nietzsche would say, well, why do people flee into the arms of totalitarians from the specter of nihilism? It's because totalitarian certainty, even though it involves slavery and the sacrifice of reason and intellect, totalitarian certainty might be preferable to nihilistic chaos. Well, it's a big problem. And he said, well, I'm telling the story of the next 200 years. It's like, well, ever since then, for the entire 20th century, we bounced between nihilism and totalitarianism with deaths on both sides, constant, and we're still doing exactly the same thing.
My mind was not merely blown because he had described the problem, but because I hadn't realized that Nietzsche could be used as an anchor to get the notion across. I knew right away that Peterson had been thinking about this problem very hard in an academic setting for decades. Everything that has happened with Professor Peterson since then has only further confirmed what this guy is up to. From his strident, principled objection to poorly thought-out legislation, to his enthralling series on the psychological significance of biblical stories, to his book 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. That clip we just watched, which I titled Avoid This Deadly Trap, was the first Jordan Peterson clip I uploaded to my channel. After that, I began uploading the really helpful gems of insight from Jordan's personality and biblical lecture series as I found them. And then clips from some of the amazingly satisfying interviews Peterson had done with free thinkers such as Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan. Along the way, through the power of YouTube and with the help of some subscribers, I managed to bring Peterson to Ethan Klein's attention, leading to his appearance on Ethan's podcast.
So I want to talk first about how we met, I guess you could say. First time I saw you was when somebody posted a link on our subreddit of you sharing our video about Humongous. And during a lecture.
Yeah, in my personality class.
Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Now, I want to show you some things. I haven't done this before, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to show you something that happened recently. Some of you may be aware of this and some of you not. Now, what I'm trying to show you, I want to show you what it means for someone to be ideologically possessed. And so you can tell when you're talking to someone like that, because this is something I learned from reading Solzhenitsyn, is because you can predict absolutely everything they're going to say. Once you know the algorithmic substructure of their political ideology, which is usually predicated on about 5 or 6 axioms, you can use the axioms to automatically generate speech content. You don't even have to hear the person, you can just predict what they're going to say. And so that alleviates any responsibility whatsoever they have for thinking. And it also allows them to believe that they have full control and full knowledge over not only full control and full knowledge about the entire world, but also the capacity to distinguish without a moment's thought between those who are on the side of the good and those who are not. And that's where the danger really comes.
You take my picture?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want my name?
Yeah, sure.
It's Humongous.
Okay. Humongous what? Humongous what?
Humongous.
Humongous what?
Humongous.
Humongous what?
Humongous.
Humongous what?
That's what it is.
Humongous what? Is that sexual harassment?
No, it's humongous.
Then why did you say that to me?
That's my name.
What? Humongous what?
Humongous what?
Humongous what? Is that sexual harassment? Is that what you just did when you said that to me?
What?
This person just spoke to me in a sexually harassing way.
I did not.
Yeah, he did. He said, do you know what my name is? And I said, what? And he said, humongous. Yeah. Yeah. This person just sexually harassed me. Dare you? How dare you? Disgusting. Disgusting. Now you're going to...
I need to go.
Okay, he's asking me to leave. He's asking me to leave after I've been sexually harassed.
So this got a lot of attention online, just so you know. And so then she responded because she was quite intensely criticized. So here's her response. Now I want you to listen to how she speaks.
My name is Zana, and I'm doing this video because we need to talk. It's become clear to me that a great deal of us suffer from the illness of patriarchy, and it's not just the men who suffer. Women can be patriarchal too.
Women? Really? But why would they be patriarchal? Towards who? Other women? That's so stupid.
So many things in our system today come from patriarchy, including racism, colonialism, capitalism, classism, and of course...
So that was interesting. And then what happened was this guy here decided that he was going to start a funding campaign for Humongous. And so he started a funding campaign on a website devoted to funding such projects, and they shut him down. So then he started another funding campaign, and he raised $140,000. And so this is his interview with Humongous.
Let me turn up my mic, Rudy, and let's see if that helps you. Is this better?
What was that?
Is that better?
Oh yeah, that's better.
So you said you were working this morning, blowing leaves?
Yes, I was in downtown in Seattle blowing.
What a salt of the earth, man. Just got pledged $130,000 and he's out there blowing some fucking leaves. Y'all can learn something from your boy Humongous here. God damn. Rudy, how you feeling right now, dude?
I feel loved.
I originally began my career as a print news reporter, and as the months went on, I found myself investing a lot of time watching a cadre of insightful free thinkers addressing the extreme cognitive dissonance in the wake of the Trump election. People like Eric Weinstein, his brother Brett, Joe Rogan, Dave Rubin, Scott Adams, Jimmy Dore, and so many more, and of course, Jordan Peterson. I realized at a certain point that I had developed into something of an online reporter covering the Jordan Peterson beat and the latest happenings of the intellectual dark web. I like to highlight their intelligent and vibrant exchanges and quote them and funnel views to the original long-form sources on YouTube and elsewhere. As the guys at the YouTube channel Rebel Wisdom say, and I'm paraphrasing here, Peterson is trying to integrate the various poles and negative outcomes of the Nietzschean dilemma. He's trying to help resolve them so we can move forward as a society. If you've been confused up to this point as to his motivation, don't be.
When people talk to me about watching my lectures, let's say, they basically say one of two things. If it's not just a simple thank you, they say one of two things. A third of them say, a quarter of them say, when I listen to you talk, it's as if you're telling me things that I already know. Yeah. It's like, yeah, well, that's exactly right, because that's what archetypal stories are. They're the description of what you already know. But that can be articulated, and then who you are and how you see yourself and the way you describe yourself all become the same thing. So that's wonderful. Then you're not at odds with yourself, you know? And then then you're a functioning unity, and that makes you much stronger and more indomitable than you would otherwise be. And then the other thing that people say, and this is more like 3/4 of them, is that they say, I was in a very dark place, I was addicted, I was drinking too much, I had a fragmented relationship with my fiancée, and I wasn't getting married. Things weren't going very well with my family, my relationship with my father was damaged, I didn't have any aim, I was wasting my time, some variant of that, some combination of those. And they said, well, I've been watching your lectures, I've decided to establish a purpose, I'm trying to tell the truth, and things are way better. And so let's say I've done maybe 8 or 9 large-scale public talks in the last 2 months, so that's probably 20,000 people, and about half of them, a third to half of them have stayed afterwards to talk to me, so that's about 7,000 people who have said that to me. And then people stop me on the street all the time and tell me exactly that story, which is just wonderful. Like, you can't imagine how good it is to be able to go to places you've never been and to have people stop you on the street spontaneously and say, look, my life is way better than it was. It's like, it's so good. And I've got like, I don't know, 35,000 letters from people since last August. It's more than that. I can't keep track of them, and it's exactly the same thing. Like, my father's about 80, he's 83, I think, 81. He's 81, and I put him in charge of going through my viewer email, which is an overwhelming job, but no, we've had discussions about this constantly. He's overwhelmed by the fact that so many people are writing and saying the same thing. It's like, well, I have a purpose, man. My life actually matters. I finally realized that, and I'm putting it into practice, and I'm bearing up under the heaviest load I can imagine, and it's really helping. It's like, God. And that's tens of thousands of responses now. So you couldn't hope for anything better than that. There's zero harm in it, right? It's just people putting their lives together. They're not mucking about with other people. They're not trying to make broad-scale social transformations about which they have no idea. They're trying to make their immediate environment better. And it's working. It's like, great. It's great. A journalist asked me why people are responding so positively to what I'm saying. The young men, for example. And I thought, why? Yeah, that's a good question. says, well, I'm actually on their side. I'm really happy that they're not wasting their lives. I'm really sad to see that people are disenchanted and nihilistic and depressed and anxious and aimless and perverse and vengeful and all of those things. It's terrible. And then to see people question whether that's necessary and then to start to rise out of it. It's like, it's so fun. Like last night I was after my talk, it's overwhelming. I don't usually think about these things, but I was after my talk last night, and so all these people line up, and they have their 15 seconds with me, and they're kind of tentative. They're excited and attentive when they come up to talk to me, and then they have 15 seconds of time to tell me something. I'm really listening to them, and they're hesitant about whether or not to share the good news about their life, and I think it's often because when people share good news about their life, people don't necessarily respond positively. They don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable. And so they'll tell me something good, and I think, oh, that's so good. Somebody says, oh, I'm getting along way better with my father. I hadn't seen him for 10 years, and now we get along. It's like, God, great. Yeah. And then the power of that, you can't overstate the power of that for individuals to get their life together. The individual is an unbelievably powerful force, and every single person who gets their act together a little bit has the capacity to spread that around them. It's a chain reaction, and so it's a lovely thing to see. And
that's fantastic.
Jordan Peterson is extremely adept at extracting meaning and inspiration from the landscape of Western mythology and religion, and everything he knows about psychology, from its biological roots up into the thoughts and emotions that characterize the mystery of human consciousness. Jordan Peterson is trying to make everything he knows from his phenomenological approach to these subjects available and digestible to the general public as a source of 99.4% utility. And it's having a genuinely positive effect. I recently monetized my channel, but this channel's always been about quality over quantity. It's never been a clip-cranking farm. But it's important to note that I do have an agenda. It's the same one I've had all of my life for whatever reason. And that agenda is to contribute as much as I can to helping our society solve and move past this Nietzschean dilemma Jordan speaks of. That's where videos like this come in, I hope. And this is where you get to see what really motivates me as a person, as a human being. So I hope you will stick with me as we explore the Nietzschean dilemma through the lens of various topics and personalities. In part one, we will take a really close look at that conversation between Jordan Peterson and Matt Dillahunty and their respective worldviews. Don't presume the video will be about bashing Matt or his worldview. You might be surprised at how much we agree on. Extending out of the failure of the talk between Jordan and Matt, we will look at the various approaches to Christianity and atheism and how they might contribute to or help solve the Nietzschean dilemma, with a focus on atheist evangelists Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, and phenomenological thinkers such as philosophers C.S. Lewis and Dallas Willard, and of course, as always here on Team McLeanful, Professor Jordan B. Peterson. Thank you for watching this introduction, and we'll see you again next time.